Today we are going to be covering the spread of the Renaissance into Northern Europe. The Northern Renaissance began in the wealthy and prosperous cities in a region known as Flanders. Flanders includes parts of northern France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. You can see the region of Flanders below on the maps. Just like in Florence and other wealthy Italian trading cities, Flanders at this time had grown very rich from trade. It was one of the major trading regions of Northern Europe. Similar to Italy, the wealthy families of Flanders had extra money to spare and helped create an artistic revival in the area by becoming patrons of the arts. From Flanders, the Renaissance spread out to other areas of Europe, including Spain, France, Germany, and across the Channel to England. One of the most famous painters of the Northern Renaissance was Jan van Eyck. Jan van Eyck was born in Belgium and worked primarily in the royal courts of Bruges, Belgium, and Lille, France. He is well known for his expertly executed realism when depicting both common people and in religious works. Van Eyck is also important because he developed a new type of oil paint, which produced stronger colors and dried very hard, meaning paintings created with these new oils have lasted centuries, retaining their original depth of color and fading slower than previous paints used. Some of Jan van Eyck's most famous works include the Ghent altarpiece, created in 1432. It is considered a masterpiece of the Northern Renaissance for its incredible detail in depicting Christ, the Virgin Mary, and John the Baptist in the top panels, along with Adam and Eve on the sides. The bottom panels show a gathering of both saints and sinners coming together at an adoration of the Lamb of God. One of Van Eyck's best-known works is the Arnolfini portrait. This is one of Van Eyck's best humanist paintings, as it shows how he liked to emphasize the value of regular people, not only royalty or religious figures like in the Middle Ages. The Arnolfini portrait is truly one of the best examples of Renaissance realism and attention to detail. The painting depicts a man and his wife in their home. If you look at the room around them, you will see the incredible complexity of the painting. For instance, in the background of the image is a mirror. The mirror not only increases perspective, giving the room a sense of depth, but it also shows a reflection of the couple and has carvings of scenes from the Passion of the Christ. Historians have debated if the mirror itself is actually representing the eye of God observing the wedding of the couple. The mirror also reflects the doorway across the room, and Van Eyck himself is painted into this reflection. You will also notice that Van Eyck's signature is above the mirror. This image is most likely depicting a wedding scene or a betrothal, an engagement, and contrary to popular opinion, the woman is not pregnant. She is holding up her dress and skirts to show off how expensive the fabric was and the layering of the cloth beneath. Jan van Eyck was best known for his religious iconography and his series of Madonna, Virgin Mary paintings, again, which highlight Van Eyck's incredible skill at realism and using perspective. Another famous Northern Renaissance artist was Albrecht Dürer, nicknamed the German Leonardo. He was both a painter and a printmaker, specializing in engravings and woodcuts. Engraving is a method of making printed images from metal plates by etching a design into the metal with acid and then filling the plates with ink to print an image. Woodcuts are like woodblock stamps. Dürer specialized in religious artwork, particularly depicting the religious tension and upheaval in Germany at the time due to the Protestant Reformation against the Catholic Church. Here are some of Dürer's best-known images. These are all either prints or engravings, meaning he had to carve these images into metal or wood and then print them. Look at the spectacular level of detail he achieved in these images, considering that he either had to chisel them out of solid blocks of wood or had to use acid to eat the images into metal plates. The first image is of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and is a woodcut from 1498. Next is a wood print taken from a series he completed over the Passion of the Christ. Notice the extensive use of shading in this image and the detail achieved through a wood carving. Dürer also completed a series of prints over the life of the Virgin Mary. And lastly, this is one of his most spectacular engravings, Adam and Eve. This is not a drawing or a painting. This was made by engraving a sheet of metal. Look at the animals in the background, the muscles in the body, and the details in the foliage behind them. For our last Northern Renaissance artist, we have Peter Bruegel, also called the Elder. He was a painter from the Netherlands, and like his northern counterparts, embraced humanist aspects of trying to show the value in ordinary human beings. He is most famous for his paintings depicting scenes from everyday peasant life. Here are two well-known examples of his work. Hunters in the Snow is one from a series of paintings showing the same village through the seasons, and it showcases the ordinary townsfolk. He also painted The Peasant Wedding, showing a wedding party in a local tavern. Just as art was changing in the Renaissance, so was writing. In the Italian Renaissance, we spoke about authors like Niccolò Machiavelli. Like Italian humanists, Northern humanist scholars also stressed the importance of education and classical learning. Although Northern humanists tended to focus more on religion than did their Italian counterparts, believing that ancient learning could be used as a way to bring about moral and religious reform. Most humanists of the time wrote in Latin, a language that was only accessible to the educated elite and members of the church. However, starting in the North, a new trend began to emerge of writers using the vernacular or the common ordinary language of the people. This meant that for the first time, works became accessible to the growing middle class, and they could embrace humanist ideas as well. The Dutch humanist Desiderius Erasmus was a Catholic priest and an expert in classical languages. He actually wrote a new Greek edition of the New Testament and improved the Latin translation of the Bible. He was a radical in that he wanted the Bible to be translated into the vernacular so that every ordinary person would be able to read it for themselves. At this time, the Catholic Church prohibited the Bible from being printed in the vernacular, believing that only members of the church had the capacity to interpret scripture, not regular people. Erasmus was a religious reformer who wanted the Catholic Church to return to the roots of ancient Christianity and give up all the material wealth it controlled. Erasmus's best-known work was In Praise of Folly, written in 1511, which called out the abuses and corruption of the church. Even though Erasmus was a Catholic, his work influenced leading members of the soon-to-start Protestant Reformation. Another important Northern Renaissance humanist writer and thinker was the Englishman Sir Thomas More. More and Erasmus were good friends and often critiqued each other's works. More held several high government positions, including being counselor to King Henry VIII of England and the Lord High Chancellor of England from 1529 to 1532. More was strongly opposed to the ideas of the Protestant Reformation and rejected the teachings of its leader, Martin Luther and the Lutherans. His best-known work, Utopia, outlined the political system of the ideal nation, where men and women lived in peace and harmony. His work coined the term utopian to describe a perfect society. As a staunch Catholic, More refused to acknowledge the divorce of King Henry VIII and his Catholic Queen Catherine of Aragon. He refused Henry's request to take the oath of supremacy, which stated that the King of England was in charge of the Church, not the Pope. For his refusal and strong Catholic faith, More was executed by his longtime friend, Henry VIII. His final words were, "I die the King's good servant, but God's first," showing his conviction in the Catholic Church and his true faith. He was canonized as a martyr and then in 2000 declared the heavenly patron of statesmen and politicians. French humanist, monk, and scholar Francois Rabelais was another influential Northern Renaissance author. He wrote in the French vernacular or common language, and his best-known work is Gargantua and Pantagruel, which tells the tale of two gentle giants. The book is both comical and satirical, criticizing the religious and superstitious practices of the day. His expert use of satire, or literary technique using irony and ridicule to highlight the vices and shortcomings of society, make his work one of the greatest in modern European writing. One Northern Renaissance writer you should all be familiar with is William Shakespeare. Shakespeare was an English poet and playwright known for embracing humanist principles. He is considered the greatest writer in the English language, writing 37 plays and 154 sonnets. Shakespeare invented the tragic comedy, or a genre of tragic comedies. His plays showed universal themes like love and loss, things everyday people could relate to. Shakespeare designed and built his Globe Theatre specifically to show his plays. Shakespeare's impact has been long felt, as he invented over 3,000 words or phrases we use in everyday life today, such as bedroom, eyeball, or break the ice, and fair play. One of the absolute most important and profound inventions of the Northern Renaissance was the printing press. The printing press allowed not only great works of Renaissance literature to spread throughout Europe, it also was one of the biggest contributing factors to the growth of the Protestant Reformation. In 1456, Johannes Gutenberg printed the first complete Bible with movable metal type. The Gutenberg Bible was in Latin, but it revolutionized how books could be made. In the medieval era, all books were painstakingly copied by hand, usually by monks. It could take years to complete one copy of a large text like the Bible or Greek classics. During the entire Middle Ages, almost 1,000 years, it is estimated by historians that only a few thousand books existed in all of Europe. Books were tremendously expensive and could only be afforded by the church or the incredibly wealthy elite. Due to the lack of books, and especially the fact that nothing in the Middle Ages was written in the vernacular or common language, most people in Europe were illiterate. Here is an infographic showing the effect of the printing press in Europe. In 1455, it is estimated that there were maybe 30,000 books in the entire continent. And less than 50 years later, in 1500, that number had skyrocketed to over 10 million. In the Middle Ages, it could take multiple months, if not years, to reproduce and copy large texts. The printing press enabled printers to produce one 600-page book every day. The impacts of the printing press cannot be overstated. By the 1600s, there were upwards of 200 million books in circulation. Mass production of books meant lower prices, and for the first time, books began to become affordable for ordinary people, which in turn resulted in rising literacy rates. The printing press, as previously stated, also contributed to the growth of religious turmoil in Europe, as many Christians could now read, and vernacular or common language editions of the Bible became widespread, much to the anger of the Catholic Church. The writings of religious reformers could be read all over Europe, and due to the invention of the printing press, the Protestant Reformation could not be contained.